with you guys. So we start recording and we start streaming as well. Just quickly set it up. It should be fairly easy to stream. And we're going to go live in a couple of minutes. But if you, yes, so we are live right now. So I'm really excited to have this session today about the ethical use of AI in literature review. And I'm really glad to have partnered with SciSpace on this topic, because I do believe that it's important to talk about literature reviews and AI and how the two of them can actually be combined, how we can leverage the AI to actually get more out of our literature reviews and do it ethically. So I don't want to, we've got quite a lot of stuff to go through today, and I don't want to delay that any longer. So I'm going to start. If you don't know me, I'm Professor Dawid Hanak, the Professor of Decarbonisation with Industrial Classes at Net Zero Industry Innovation Centre, but also I'm a founder of Motivating Academic, where we support researchers, consultants, and academics with research skills, coaching, and career advice. So today's topic really is about the literature review and use of AI in literature review, because at the end of the day, literature review is something that we do have to do literally every day as academics for every project, because you do have to have that foundation and that kind of, you need to embed your research in the current state of the art. So what we're going to talk today, and that session, I'd like to say that session is unique, mostly because we're going to talk about why literature review is important. We're going to talk about what are the key elements of literature review and what are the important elements of literature reviews. But also we're going to talk about how you actually do it. So I don't like sessions where you only talk about why you do it and what to do, and you don't get any implementation. So we're going to do a live demo of how to do literature review and how we can use AI to actually support us in achieving our goals.
Professor, to interrupt you, I see somebody raising their hand. I was going to ask whether we are going to do the Q&A at the end, or will you be taking questions during the session?
Yes, we're going to do a Q&A at the end of the session. And
Awesome.
If you have any comments, do leave them in the chat, if that's all right. Because I'm not able to switch between the slides and Meet, so I'll be coming back to comments regularly. Okay. So please
Awesome.
do, if you've got, I can see Amir has his hand up. If you've got any questions, do let me know. So I'm just going to check whether everything works on the other platforms, just to make sure we are fine. I do believe it should be all right. Yeah, we are fine. And I do hope you can hear me okay. Can you just do a thumbs up? Yeah, that works. Okay, going back. So we're going to use practical examples today. I'm going to show you how to actually use some of the tools that we will be talking about. And I'm going to give you my simple framework that I've developed during my PhD to actually do a literature review. So I give you 5 steps to do a literature review and show you how you can implement that in your kind of research from tomorrow, really. So my big promise to you is that today you're going to use how to use AI in an ethical way, so that you can support your literature review and reduce your effort by at least 50%. So I'm going to show you where AI can ethically support you in actually doing literature review. And as I said, we've got limited time, we've got about an hour today, but I hope you get lots of value, and the recording of that will be on YouTube later on. So don't worry, but make sure you take your notes. The only thing I can ask you is that you will not just be here to watch it and then forget about it. I want you to be action taker. I want you to actually implement what we're going to talk about, at least some of the elements. So if you implement 50% of what we're talking about today, I'll be more than happy. And there are obviously challenges with AI, and we all know that since ChatGPT came to live and became kind of a mainstream tool in research, there are a couple of challenges that we see. And some of them are obviously, we are tempted by the possibility to ask AI to write for ourselves. Okay, so the main issue with that is who is the author of that work? Where is that work coming from? What are the sources that are being used by AI to actually compile that write-up for you, right? So these are the challenges that you might be facing. Another challenge is what's the quality of that output? I've seen papers that essentially use ChatGPT, as a reviewer, I've seen papers that essentially use ChatGPT or only any other AI tool to write entire sections. And since as you use those tools, you become familiar with their word structure, you become familiar with how they actually write. So you can actually see that something was written by AI. And also you can actually see that the citations are a little bit messed up sometimes, or it's getting better, but still you see quite a kind of fake citations or fake journals being there. So you kind of relying on AI to write your stuff, you kind of might lose your integrity, scientific integrity, and your reputation if you do it in the wrong way. Okay, so this is the challenge that we all face. That kind of, do we use AI? Do we just ignore it and do it the conventional way? But I do believe that there are a couple of opportunities for us where we actually sorry, I just want to make sure that, yeah, I've got everything all right. There are a couple of opportunities for us to use AI. So AI can be our assistant to improve our work, or your work, quality and impact, if done correctly, okay? So if you use it for a specific set of tools, I do believe you can actually benefit from using AI in your research. Another opportunity is that AI can help us discover more relevant sources and more relevant papers. Even though we have access to some of the databases, or you may not have access to all the databases, you still potentially can ask, can get insights from journals and publishers that are not these kind of mainstream or available to your institution. So having AI to discover some of the relevant research and support us with search in general can help us. And I see it myself. I'll talk about this in a minute, but I'll talk about Boolean search and stuff. But that's the standard way of doing literature review. But AI can help us look at the broader picture of the current state of the art in current literature, rather than just in the search terms. And that leads me to the third opportunity. So being on the edge of technology and tools available to researchers can not only help you maintain your integrity if you use those tools in an ethical way and you promote responsible use of AI, but also it can save you time. And with that saved time, you can actually focus more on doing science than reviewing what has already been done, and then take your academic to the next level. Okay, so you can really focus on what is really important, which is finding solutions to research questions. So when I first heard about OpenAI and ChatGPT, that was 2020, everyone was really buzzing around this in the business world, and everyone was saying that it would change the way we do things. So I was a little bit skeptical, obviously, because I started seeing papers with, those statements that are generated by AI, and you can clearly see some of the prompts being published. And I don't know how this passed through review, but when I was reading one of those papers, I thought I'm never going to use AI for my research, mostly because I was worried about my integrity. But then I started exploring other tools other than ChatGPT. So ChatGPT purely kind of text generator, or for now, I mean, there is visual generator and voice as well. But there are other tools that actually help us determine the best papers for our work, or determine the interconnectivity between the papers. And that actually made me think that AI can actually be helpful. It can help me understand the research area better in a way that I couldn't do without just looking at, the Scopus outputs or Web of Science outputs or Google Scholar outputs. So that was kind of a breakthrough for me, actually, and that helps me a lot with writing my proposals, writing my papers, so that I can actually see the links between the research papers clearer and understand those papers faster. So that is really a key to me. So that was my actually big revelation. So we need to embrace AI and learn how to use it in an ethical way to advance our knowledge and careers. So because of having access to those tools, I was able to understand and read through more papers and find more relevant papers. And as a result, I could write better introductions, I could write better support statements for my proposals. And as a result, my success rate went significantly higher. So that obviously has impact on your careers, because the more projects you bring in, the more projects you deliver, the more people you meet, the further you're going, right? Because you get more projects, and it's like a flywheel. The more you do, the more you get, all right? But you have to start somewhere. So why do we need literature reviews in the first place, right? That is the first question. Why do we need to understand what already has been done, and how that influences our research and how that influences research of others? So I do like to identify 5 cases or 5 ideas behind why we actually do literature reviews and why it helps us. So obviously the first thing we do with literature review is we identify research gaps, right? So we need to understand what type of research already has been done, and we need to understand what are the research gaps. So research gap is something that is worth investigating but hasn't been done by other people, right? Also, research gaps can be tricky because sometimes people don't investigate those specific areas because there is no point of doing that. So understanding the current state of the art really is what makes you an expert in your research area. And that can help you decide whether to investigate something or not to investigate something, okay? Because sometimes it's just a waste of time to investigate a specific research area. It also helps us, so literature review helps us establish context and relevance for our research. So when we write proposals, especially, and particularly when you write a proposal for a PhD, you write a research proposal to a research council or your government, you need to set the scene. You need to explain why the research that you're doing is important and why the approach that you're proposing is relevant and appropriate to actually deliver on those objectives of this research. So that significance and relevance is something that literature review helps us with, because you do have to embed your research within the current body of knowledge and explain why and how your research is innovative and potentially breakthrough. And also, literature review helps us avoid duplicating some of the efforts that has already happened in the past. So without appropriate understanding of the research field, you might actually do the same thing that has been done 10, 20 years ago and conclude that there is no point of going forward, okay? I've seen cases of that. So definitely make sure, these are the main points for doing literature review. But also, literature review can help us inform research methodology. I don't know how many times I did search on, say, my background is process engineering, and I use Aspen as one of the tools. So I basically search Aspen in the quotation marks plus the technology that I want to investigate, so that I can understand whether there are any existing models or whether there are any existing methodologies that are being used for that specific set of technology and tool. So that then this informs my approach, right? So I can at least verify some of my models or some of my methods with existing literature and make sure that I've got that data to validate my research. But also, we do use literature review to support and justify our research questions. So you might come up with a research question first, because you're talking to somebody in industry, you're talking to policymakers, you might come up with an idea for a research question, but then you need to verify whether it's a valid research question. You might want to test and kind of verify whether your hypothesis has legs, really. So whether it is something that is worth investigating. That's why we do literature reviews in the first place. So what are the key steps in doing literature review? And I'd like to distinguish 5 steps of doing literature reviews, as I already mentioned. And my focus framework, I'd like to put acronyms on whatever I do, really. So there's 5 steps in focus framework. So the first step is frame the scope. And the second step is to obtain the sources. You need to know where to get your data from or to get to your literature from. The third step is curate for quality, which basically means gather only the papers that have high quality and a high relevance to your research question. Understand and synthesize, step 4. That's something which is the key part of doing literature review, which basically is how you read the papers, you understand the key themes in your research papers, and then you collect the information from that research papers in the form of a data table, which I'll show you in a minute. And finally, you do the writing, okay? So you summarize everything you've collected, anything you've analyzed in writing in your research paper or your review paper. Okay, so a key thing I want to emphasize here and in this framework, you start writing at the end. Okay, many people start with literature reviews, you start reading, you start writing the literature review, then you feel overwhelmed because there is so many sources, there is no time to actually go deep into each source because you have to write your literature review because you have a deadline. But if you follow these 5 steps, and naturally you would go step 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if necessary, you will iterate back to step 2 to obtain more sources if you see a specific research gaps, or if you see a specific teams are not represented enough, you might need to go back to get those research sources and analyze more of them. Okay, and only after you build your review matrix and you're happy with the comprehensiveness of that, so you kind of see that you've covered majority of relevant and high quality sources in your research field, that's when you would start writing. Okay, if there's one thing I want you to take away from today, is actually this: write at the end, but prepare quite a lot before you actually write. So let's take it step by step, as using one of the best prompts for LLMs. Let's take it step by step, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by taking those steps on the case study. Later on, I will have a case study later on, but now I will just explain what each step involves, really. So this shows you how to do it. This shows you why to do it. This shows you what to do, and then I'll show you how to do it. So the first step is frame the scope. So the purpose of that step is to actually clarify what are the objectives and boundaries for your literature review. Okay, so you need to specify what subject area you're interested in. Obviously, when you talk about climate change, there are so many different sub areas or themes within that big research area that you cannot really review everything. Otherwise, you end up with IPCC report. Okay, but make sure that you have a concealed area. You can always expand. Okay, if you feel like it's not enough once you've gone through these steps, if you feel like it's not enough, it's not comprehensive enough, you can always expand. But cutting it down is a little bit more challenging because you don't know what is more important than what's more important, what's less important, what you can cut. So define time frame. That's quite important. So when you define your scope of literature review, you define whether you look at past 3 years, past 5 years, past 10 years. And again, that would depend on the research field. In my research field, which is quite fast moving, which is carbon capture, hydrogen, the direct air capture, we see significant developments every 3 years, every 5 years. So majority of the research papers actually focus on that window time frame, so 3 to 5 years. And also you would define the type of sources. So type of sources that you include within your review. So again, depending on what you do, whether it's academic work, whether it's consultancy work, you might want to include only academic papers. You might want to include only research papers. excluding some of the conferences, presentations, and so on. You will also, based on that scope, you initially identify some of the research questions or hypotheses that you would want to test or present in your literature review. It's a little bit less important when you write it for your thesis, because literature review for a thesis would actually explain the current state of the art and what are the research gaps. Whereas when you do a review paper or a proposal, you do a literature review to justify something, to present a piece of work. You present specific way of thinking. So that's why you want to identify, based on the initial searches, you want to identify what's the focus really and what's the hypothesis that you'll be testing in your literature review. And then at the end of the day, you would establish those inclusion and exclusion criteria. So once you collect all the papers, you would need to decide which to include, which to exclude. And that partially includes some of the tasks from 1 and 2, but also it could include exclusion or inclusion based on specific keywords. It can include exclusion or inclusion based on specific journals, and so on. I'll give you an example in a minute. Second step is obtain the sources, okay? So once you know what you're looking for, you need to get that. You need to know where to get that from. So obviously the purpose of that is to find and collect relevant literature. And I would encourage you to use academic databases, libraries, and search engines. If you're not sure whether you have access to something, if you're part of the university, do ask your library officer, because they have a vast understanding of where to get stuff from. They might be able to loan something for you as well. So make sure that you have that connection. And commonly we use Scopus, Web of Science, Google Scholar, Google even, to find the literature to support our research. We use keywords and Boolean operators and kind of filters to refine the search results. Obviously, when you do carbon capture and storage, without any specific, so with just a keyword, carbon capture storage or climate change, you get so many resources and sources that you might feel overwhelmed. So it might be better to actually start filtering that based on, for example, years, as we explained, based on type of the source. But also you can use Boolean operators, which is and or not. So basically, you say you want carbon capture and, for example, power generation systems. You want, I don't know, renewable energy and Morocco or any other country, okay? So that you actually can narrow down your search. And finally, you will gather a comprehensive list of potential sources, okay? So you gather them in the form of a table or in the form of a document, so that you know what to review next. Steps 2. Step 3 is curate for quality. So curate for quality is, we basically assess the relevance and quality of the collected literature. And that is, so the relevance is fairly straightforward, okay? Because it's down to you to decide whether that paper actually is relevant to what you want to discuss or what you want to explain or what you want to review in your literature review. But the quality is very subjective, right? So how do you assess quality? There's no single measure of quality. We know people use impact factors, people use citations, but these tend to be kind of vanity metrics. They could be manipulated, unfortunately, so they are really subjective. So I would always say that when you review a paper, focus on that paper alone, not on the journal itself, because you might have poor quality papers in a good journals, unfortunately. And focus on whether the science behind the paper is actually sound and correct. So that's how you can actually assess the quality of that paper. So you have to have that understanding of that research field. So the tasks within the curate for quality step 3 is evaluate paper for quality, as I mentioned. So you would consider paper and journal quality, but focus on the paper quality. I would then review, I always review abstracts and conclusions to determine relevance, okay? So rather than reading the full paper, I read abstract and the conclusion of the paper. I can verify whether they discuss the areas or the topics that I'm interested in. And then I select relevant high quality papers or sources for further review. So that is when you will actually start reading the entire paper. So don't read the entire paper before you actually down select them. Understand and synthesize. That's the most important step. Step number 4, most important step in doing literature review. This is where the critical analysis and synthesis of the literature comes together. That's when we actually generate new insights. That's when we generate new understanding from literature review. We identify research gaps, we identify research limitations, and future direction for research. This is where human part of our brains actually isn't necessary, because that critical thinking bit is something that AI, I don't think, can do yet. I'm not sure that it will be able to do it for some time. At least some of the models we've got available, there might be better ones. But I would still imagine if you do a search of how to write a literature review, there are hundreds of thousands of papers explaining how to do a literature review. I would imagine that that creativity, that critical ability to think critically is our unique thing as humans. And we need to utilize that to actually analyze the literature. So those tasks is basically, in this step, you would conduct detailed assessment of the selected papers, which basically means reading, taking notes, extracting data out of the paper and collating that in the form of key themes, findings, methodologies. So you might want to collect that in the data table or in the data document, whatever works for you, really. And I always recommend, as I mentioned, to create review matrix, which is either a Google sheet, or it could be Excel spreadsheet, where you basically have the sources. I'll show you an example in a minute. You've got the sources and you've got the themes that you want to collect. And in each cell, you actually collect the data or a snippet from the paper, or a specific number, or a specific technology, or a specific aspect that you want to review. So that's step number 4. And finally, we start typing, right? We've got the big spreadsheet with the data organized by teams, organized by technologies, whatever fits your purpose. Then you summarize it in writing, really. So that's when you compile the synthesized information into a coherent and structured document. You would first draft the structure of the paper, bullet point what you want to discuss in each part of the literature review, and then you start typing section by section, ensuring there's proper citation to each of your references, which you can do using reference management software, for example. And finally, once you have a draft, you go through a number of iterations between your research team, between your supervisors, your line managers, or yourself, to actually make sure that you have covered majority of the research area, that the review that you did is comprehensive, and that it is coherent, complete, and clear. Okay, so this is the steps that I usually take in doing literature review, and whether that's a small literature review for my research paper, or whether that's a big literature review as a review paper that I publish with my collaborators, these steps are all the same. It's just a matter of scale and time that we spent on it. Sorry, just missed it. So I promised you that we're going to do a practical examples today. So I have a practical example of a conventional way of doing literature review. So this is something that I've started recently doing, mostly because I'm working on a project with one of the directory capture company, and I'm writing a research paper for them, or with them, really. So I use the focus framework to actually start developing the information or data matrix for my review paper. I'm going to take you step by step how I did that. So the first step is, sorry, there's quite a lot of text here because I didn't really know how to put that in a coherent way. Yeah, so the first step is define the scope. So the scope for this work is materials for direct air capture. The time frame is last past years. So again, we only focus on sources from 2019 onwards, and we only focus on academic papers. We're not interested in industrial white papers, policy briefings. We only want academic papers, and we're not including conference papers, for example, as well. So we identify the research question that drives the literature review. So we want to understand what is the current state of the art in materials for directory capture. So that is the core theme behind the literature review. We want to understand the material side of directory capture and what is the current state of the art. And then the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So that's where you can play with narrowing down your search. So we excluded any studies that focused on technology, process, techno-economics, and lifecycle assessment, because that is not the core idea behind the literature review that we're doing. We excluded conference papers and presentations because these are rarely peer-reviewed, so we cannot really justify including them because the quality might be a little bit lower, I would say, but still we're collecting them. So I still collect those papers and they would be still in our database, but we wouldn't include them in the final paper. Okay, there's more inclusion and exclusion criteria that we use. So for example, we focus on solid sorbents rather than on liquid solvents, but I just wanted to give you an example of how I frame things within that focus framework. So next step is obtain sources. So what I did for that specific piece of work, I tend to use Scopus. My majority of the work that I work with is kind of indexed in Scopus, but I always search Google Scholar and other sources. So I use Google Scholar to get a little bit wider open access understanding of what has been published. I use SciSpace, recently started collaboration or partnership with them, and I did use them for a while. And I do see a value in how that kind of technology they develop and how the models, the AI models, can support getting access to some of the sources that I didn't have access to. And I also used Research Rabbit. So Research Rabbit is quite interesting AI-based tool as well, but it helps you visualize the network of the connections between the papers, and you can actually understand which source is more important within the specific research area. So the next step was to use keywords, Boolean operators, filters to refine search results. So as I said, I tend to overuse Boolean search, unfortunately, so I narrowed down my research, but then I do multiple searches. So for example, Boolean search would be directory capturing quotation marks and materials in quotation marks, so that Scopus or Google Scholar would actually search only those terms. So I want directory capture and material, okay? Only this sources with these two terms in abstract and conclusion will be included in the results for my search. And I also included TGA, which is thermogravimetric analysis, the type of the methodology, or fluidize, which is type of the reactor that we are interested in. So I use quotation marks to search for entire phrase. So if I search with directory capture without quotation marks, I would get search results for direct, I would get search results for air, I would get search results for capture, okay? But I wouldn't get for directory capture. I would get them, but they would be diluted. And then I've got the comprehensive list of potential sources, so including titles, abstracts, conclusions, citation data. So I have that collected in my data table. I use citation management tools, Zotero, Mendeley. These are the two main ones that are kind of recommended. Curate for quality. So that is where we actually start evaluating the paper's quality and relevance. So how I usually do it, I check whether the paper is within open access, directory of open access journals, if it's open access paper, mostly because there's quite a lot of predatory publishers that you pay to publish, and the quality of that is very low. I wouldn't touch them really. So I also check quartile rate ranking, Q1, Q2, just in case. I just want to make sure that this paper is indexed in Scopus, because for some reason it's still important, but I just want to tick that box. I should say published by responsible publisher and reliable publisher. I missed the word over there. But the main part, so point E, yes, is the research itself of high quality, okay? So that research should be high quality. Otherwise, I wouldn't include that in the paper. I review the abstracts to determine relevance, so I check again inclusion and exclusion criteria. I collect relevant information just to justify inclusion and exclusion. So in case some of my colleagues or some of my partners actually ask why I haven't included that paper, I know exactly why I haven't included that. Okay, I have that exclusion and inclusion criteria clarified. And then I select relevant papers. Okay, so that's the final step. Very easy, no subpoints of that. Understand and synthesize. So that is the fourth step, where we basically conduct the detailed assessment of the papers. So I read the paper in detail, I take notes that are relevant, capture or main for the data that are relevant for me. And as you can see at the bottom, I have the portfolio's Curate review matrix, and this is how it looks like basically. So I have the reference, so I know where that data is coming from. I have the year, so that I can then filter by the year as well. And then the sections that I'm interested in. So in this case, those material types, analysis method, CO2 uptake, and then I have main findings, research limitations. So main findings is so that I can compare different studies, and then limitations is so that I can explain what is the future direction, what are currently gaps, what are current gaps, what is missing in the literature. So this is how I structure all of my research literature reviews. Some of it is already published as well for another paper, so I usually include that as a supplementary information or include that in the paper itself. And finally, summarizing writing. So this is the step that I'll be taking in a few weeks' time after I review all the literature that's I've collected. And the review really is fairly straightforward. But again, it depends on the structure is straightforward, but depends on whether you're writing a thesis or whether you're writing a research paper, review paper. So for a review paper, you would obviously have an introduction where you justify why there is a need for review in this space, and if you want to publish, and how it's different from existing peer reviews. So that's where you explain why that review is different and why it's needed. You've got the method, so you explain how you collected data. Then you explain your thematic review. I prefer to do thematic reviews for whatever reason, but this is the core body of your literature review. However you shape it, this is the main part of your literature review. Then you have a perspective for future research, where you basically explain the research gaps, kind of reveal the research gaps, and identify the future recommendations, for how future work should happen, and you have a conclusion. So your literature review for a thesis would be really point B, C, and D, most likely, where perspective is kind of showing why your project is important. And for the review paper, you do all of them. And finally, you need to make sure that you have proper citation referencing for all sources. So different publishers, different universities have different requirements. So whether you use Harvard or whether you use out-of-date or numbered system, it doesn't really matter as long as you use citation management tools, because you can switch between one or another pretty quickly. And finally, you would go through the iterations, right? So you'd go through the editing to make sure that your work is clear, coherent, completeness. And from experience, it usually requires about 3 to 5 iterations between your co-authors to actually get that to the submittable state. So how to use AI in all of this, right? So what is the potential for use AI in an ethical way, and literature review, and how you can reduce your effort by 50%? Well, I'm going to go through all of the steps again, and I'm going to show you where AI can help. So the first step, frame the scope. We've seen a significant increased number of papers published over the past 5 to 10 years, mostly because of new people coming in, but also because of the publish and perish culture, which is unfortunate. So reviewing that vast amount of data is pain. I'm talking from my experience. Whenever I see a new paper, I would like to read it, but there's still a backlog of papers that I need to read. So having ability to screen through the papers so that we can identify knowledge gaps, we can identify what is new in that paper is really helpful. So that is one of the ideas behind using AI to support literature review. And some of the examples, you can use Perplexity to do that, Consensus, as I said, these are the 2 ones that I knew for quite a long time, and then SciSpace obviously can support us with doing that. Step 2 is obtain the sources. So the tools that I'm using, they actually have access to either open source data, which can be used commercially, or they have licenses to use that data within the tool. I know there's some discussion around use AI, and some of the publishers are not happy about it because, for example, specific tool used papers without the permission. But I think that in case, for example, Illicit and SciSpace, they do have those licenses with publishers, which is really encouraging because that use of research is ethical and it's not kind of a plagiarism there. And that also helps these tools to actually offer you a full citation and acknowledgement. So if you use generic LLMs like ChatGPT or Claude, you will struggle with references because they might give you a part of the reference correctly, but then the volume will be wrong, or the journal will be wrong, or something. When you use tools that are directly kind of focusing on research development and data mining, then that will be very helpful. And some of the sources are more relevant than using Boolean search. And that is mostly because in Boolean search, you would do directory capture in a quotation mark, and you search for that phrase, then you have to add another set of keywords, another set of keywords. But with Use AI, it can understand the semantics, it can understand the meaning of what you're looking for, and it can use alternative keywords. It can help you determine a better research question, and it can help you understand that research reality better to find more sources. Curate for quality. So I'd like to see that using AI could help us become more objective in terms of assessing quality of research, mostly because unless, again, it all depends on the material set or data set that has been trained. So there might be some bias, obviously, but it is still someone else that assessing the quality for us rather than ourselves, because we tend to be biased as well. And sometimes we are not aware of it even. So it can help us identify mistakes in omissions. So having that understanding of physics, understanding of science, can pinpoint some of the limitations of the study that we were not aware of. And also it can help us analyze and summarize multiple sources at a time, so that we can verify the quality or kind of relative quality of a paper with respect to the data set or the set of papers that we use. So the tools that I've tested and I used is NotebookLM, Consensus, Illicit, and obviously SciSpace. That we're going to do a case study in a minute. And finally, one more step. So we've got step 4 is understand and synthesize. So that tools can help us extract some of the data. So we can say there is a chat with PDF, we can extract data from PDFs and actually get a table of those results and collect that data a little bit easier than reading through all of those papers and find one single paper, one single number from a specific paper. So data extraction is something that is very helpful. It can help us identify the core themes across various papers. So I should have added NotebookLM here as well. Consensus SciSpace is something that that I would recommend using for this. And then what I'm still not sure AI can do very well is critical review of data. So that means it can summarize data, understand trends, but then having that critical analysis, which basically means gaining insights from the data and then putting together a reasonable recommendations for the future, that's something I think we're still doing better than AI. And also wanted to emphasize that, drawing that conclusions using AI might be a little bit on the border between ethical and unethical, mostly because if you propose an idea or present an idea as your own, but that idea was actually generated by AI, who is the owner of that? And do you really know that it is AI created idea, or they just took the idea from someone else who already published that somewhere? Okay, so that's something we need to be careful about. So finally, we have summarizing writing, and that's something I would strongly discourage you from doing. Okay, I would encourage people to write your own texts, and obviously you can use AI to start putting the structure. It can help you with the writer's block. It can help you improve your writing or improve your thinking. But also, when you write your own thing, you're not committing AI plagiarism, as I explained. So AI is using database to actually produce those outputs. And as a result, we might end up with plagiarism if the references are not correctly. So accuracy of the sources is quite challenging as well. Limited critical thinking, we already discussed that. Some of the general models were shown to have bias in thinking, so they prefer a way of thinking over another one, so that is bias already. So they might produce biased results, but also some tools are already designed to write papers, and that is completely unethical, I would believe, because if a company claims that they are there to write papers for you, who is the owner of that paper? Would you put that tool as a co-author or as an acknowledgement? You know, I still believe that we do have to write our own papers, proposals, and we should use AI as assistants and in a way to support our thinking rather than to replace us. Because at the end of the day, it's your ideas that matter. So how does it work in practice, right? So let me switch to SciSpace, and I'm going to show you how you can actually do it in practice. Very quick demo. I've put a couple of steps down that I want to show you so that I don't forget anything. So I should have mentioned, if you type in SciSpace.com, for now you will see that it will redirect you to typeset.io. Right, you should be able to see it now. Let me just double check. Yeah. So I'm just looking at some comments. Yeah, there will be recording will be available, so no worries. So going to the SciSpace, it will redirect you to typeset.io, and I do believe that sometime this year they will switch that, but that's right. So what you will end up with when you go to SciSpace is a search engine, really. So what I want to do is have the same research question that I had previously. So I would just say, what is the current state of the art in materials for directory capture? Question mark. And when I saw it, it's just like a search engine, like your Google, like Yahoo or something. But what it does is it actually gathers all the research papers that it has in its database, and it analyzes it to kind of quite vast extent. So I'm having a premium version over here. So when you use a free version, you can do kind of summary of the entire top 5 papers, and that what you can see gives you quite decent summary of that research area with these citations, so you can directly link to that specific paper. What is more interesting, especially for me, is I can then filter, for example, last 5 years. That's something I'm interested in for my research, for example. So I can filter a little bit more. I can select research journal. It does that automatically, so it does it multiple times. And you can see what it does is it gathers insights from that research paper itself. So this is the general insights from the paper that you can then, for example, take to your notebook. I would just create a new notebook for direct air capture air project. Let's just assume this one, right? And it will add this to my notebook, which is basically a writer. It does have an AI writer kind of a feature where you can see that it tries to expand the text, which is fine, which is helpful when you're stuck, for example, but I wouldn't rely on writing the whole thing. Obviously, you can write the entire paper here and then use the AI writer to improve grammar, right? So it can fix grammar, for example. Obviously, it is AI generated text, and it improves on AI generated text, so there wouldn't be much difference, but it's still very helpful. Then we can basically have a section by section summary of the specific paper. Okay, so you can see over here, it just gives lots of data around that specific paper, and you can add additional columns over here. You also limit to PDFs, so you make sure that there's a PDF available for you to actually use it. So that's quite nice. So you can see it gives us the review matrix. I would then, based on that information, I would select the papers to fully review, and I would go in details in that paper. Okay, for example, let's go for the first one. For example, you can save that paper to your collection. Okay, and then you will have that papers in your library where you can review them. You can go back to them. So that is how you can collect papers in SciSpace, for example. But what I'm personally really interested about and really excited about is that chat with the papers. It's a very well-known chat with PDF, but this is the version where you chat with the research paper. And what you can basically do is you can use some of the example prompts over here. So practical implications results, which is basically a summary of what was in the table. But what I can do is, it's the same over here. I can ask, for example, is what are the limitations in this work, or what are the research gaps? Right, so what it will do is it would analyze the text of the paper and use its database to explore different papers within this research area, and will give me an overview of what could be a potential research gap to build on that.
Sorry to interrupt. I think your screen might have frozen. Actually, it's still on the literature review screen.
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, yeah.
Because it's different tab and I forgot to change it. So, so basically, what I did is I looked at what are research gaps, and then it gave me an output of what are potential research gaps in the paper. I can also dig a little bit deeper, so I can use some of the predefined questions over here. So limitation of the paper, literature survey, practical implications. But what I can ask is, what is the best sorbent? So based on this paper, it's based on a directly capture new sorbents. So I can ask it what's the best material based on that specific paper. Okay. So it gives me some overview of this study indicates that gamma aluminum oxide impregnated with polyethylamine PI and TPA is a promising material. Okay, so it gives me a comparison, gives me the numbers that I'm interested in, and that could go directly into my table, and then I can review that in my research, in my review, literature review. Right, so if I go back over here, so then you can see that I can take any part of it into my notebook, and I can save that to my notebook as well. And you can see what it does is I've got the insights that I've taken from the table. I've got the summary of the research field with some of the citations there as well. So that's really how AI can support. There is much more features over here. So they do have kind of Copilot, which I showed you, citation generator, where it can prepare the citation for you. So if you don't use any citation generator, and then a paraphraser, which is quite helpful when you want to paraphrase your own writing to make it sound a little bit better. Okay, so this is a little bit the kind of brief demo of SciSpace. There are other tools as well, but I particularly like SciSpace mostly because they have access to papers that I wouldn't have access to through my library, for example. And this helps me to become more aware of my research area and access the sources that are not there. But also, importantly, they do have licenses to do it, which is an ethical way of using literature. So going back, hopefully this was helpful. If you've got any questions, we'll handle that at the end. I'm being mindful of the time. So one question I have for you is that you don't support publish or perish culture, and that you use AI to improve quality of your outputs, but not their number, okay? Because I've seen so many people actually using AI to write papers for them, and you can see the statements that I have limitations. If you type in Scopus, you'll see those statements. So I want you to commit to responsible use of AI, if there's another thing that you will take out of this session. So let's review. So why do we use AI for literature review? Well, it can help us help us to speed up the tasks that otherwise would take much of our creative time and critical thinking time. Sorry, there's a typo over there. What we can do with AI? Well, it can help us identify the scope for a review and determine some of the unique angles that your review can actually take to add value to knowledge. It can also help you provide relevant sources and summarize them, but also how we can use it ethically. So, well, obviously we would use AI to support our writing, to support our development of a paper, but I encourage people to use and acknowledge use of AI in official communication papers, thesis, presentations. So currently I'm working on a paper, the review paper that I mentioned the review paper, and I'm going to mention in methods section that I use, for example, SciSpace to initially analyze the data and identify sources. Naturally, you wouldn't mention Scopus or Web of Science. They do have some filters as well, but in kind of light of in name of responsible use of AI, I'm going to start doing this as well. So I hope, I want to know what's been most valuable. If we take a minute and mention in the chat what has been the most valuable in this session, do let me know. And I know there are people on YouTube and LinkedIn. I hope these are still running. And I'm going to respond to your questions after the session. So I'm going to answer the questions only for those who are here within the meeting. Right. How much time do we need to collect database, or when to decide when collecting enough? SciSpace, okay. Yeah. Demonstration about that. Okay, cool. Good to know. I know a deep review will be happy about that. I'm sure we're going to do more of those demonstrations as we go along.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would suggest maybe, Professor, if we can take the questions from the beginning. I think we can start with something that Hamidullah asked at the beginning, where he said, can you explain the difference again between literature review for a paper and thesis?
Okay. Right. So before I start, let me finish my presentation, because there is something that you can get out of this presentation, and then I'll go to those questions, if that's fine. Okay, because I just have one more slide. I hope I did achieve that. I did basically showed you how you can use ethically AI and reduce your effort with at least 50%. And I want, if you're serious about developing your career and improving your productivity, I want you to be an action taker, and I want you to apply the learning from this session, right? Because at the end of the day, if you apply it, even though it might not be 100%, even if you apply 30 or 40% of what you've learned today, you're still moving forward. Okay, marginal improvement, guys. So apply the learning. Obviously, you can create a free account on SciSpace and do the majority of the work that I showed today. So when you do it, I do encourage you to actually do some of the searches, try it for your research projects, and then make sure you share your outputs. If you have any interesting outputs out of it, so share it on your social media and tag us at Motivate the Academic and SciSpace, so that we know about it and so that we can share it with our networks later on. Okay. And if you want to get more, I know SciSpace, they have a premium account, which I personally use, and I feel like it's a significant improvement, especially about the chatting with the paper. So we've got a special offer. So they were kind to prepare that special offer for you. And we've got two options, right? So we've got two options. So the first option is you can get 20% off monthly subscription. So when you go to the SciSpace website, you can basically use DH20 code, and on the monthly subscription you get 20% off. And then we have another option where if you subscribe to our career club, you would be able to get more than 42% off, which is about $60 of annual subscription. So I feel like annual subscription is $144, so you would pay $60 less. But also with that option, you get 7 days trial, which basically means you can try the premium before you actually buy it. Okay. And on the Career Club, we also have a trial period, so you can basically try it and then decide whether you want to keep it or not. Okay. Some of the terms and conditions are on the platform. If you want more details on that, ping me after the session. Okay. So now your turn. I'm happy to take your questions. Let me go back to my Meet channel, and I'm going to go through the comments for now, and then I'm going to take, I can see a couple of people have raised their hands. So let me go through the questions. And recording available, yes. So yeah, we'll have recording on YouTube, whether that's Motivated Academic YouTube or whether that's SciSpace. We will also have a session recorded on our Career Club on the Motivated Academic platform. So it's okay to use Quillbot just to enhance. Right, so Mohammed, is it okay to use Quillbot? I just enhance your writing. So Quillbot is similar to Grammarly, similar to, so even Word documents of Microsoft Word, they do have that editor option and that improve your grammar. So I would imagine Quillbot does similar thing. I haven't used it personally. I'm aware of it. I know it does paraphrasing and stuff. So paraphrasing, you have to be careful with it, because if you copy paste and then paraphrase, you're basically committing mosaic plagiarism. So I would say if you paraphrase, you still need to cite the appropriate source. If you write your own thing and then you want to improve your writing, improve your English or whatever language you're using, I would say it should be all right. It's still, at the end of the day, it's all language models, right? So that should be fine. What's about criteria for determining 5 to 10 top papers? I think so. When we go,
I have answered that already in the chat.
you answer that. Yeah, is it the top papers from the first?
So we use an algorithm that takes in several parameters. So we don't use. So initially, a lot of people thought that it is just citations, but using citations actually gives it becomes a disadvantage for the newer papers, which might be very good, because obviously it takes time to get citations, right? So we use several parameters such as quality of the journal, that is, it is published in, prior work of the author, maybe, and several other parameters that the algorithm takes in. It's very difficult for a human being to do it. So we have designed an algorithm for that, and that's how we decide the top 5 or top 10 papers. Yeah.
Makes sense. Definitely helpful. Yeah, I just wanted you to explain it because you know how it works. So
yeah,
you know the behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So how much time do we need to collect database, or when to decide we've collected enough data to start synthesize papers? So that is very subjective, I would say, right? So there is no specific number of papers that you would review. There is no length per review paper that is good or bad. Okay, so as long as, so if you do a systematic review, then you would collect all the papers in your research field and review all the papers and then do exclusion inclusion criteria. If you do a thematic review within the last 5 years, you would review still majority of the research, but some of the researchers actually publish similar thing in some of the papers. So you may want to decide that you don't include 1 or 2 sources from that specific area, from that specific authors. It is subjective, right? So I would start small first. I would say start 50 sources, and then add on the top of it. Okay, try not to get overwhelmed, because if you collect hundreds of papers and you start reviewing them, you'll get bored, you will get overwhelmed. Start small and start building up to the required standard. But also, in many cases, I would recommend people work with someone else as well. So whether that's a colleague, whether that's a collaborator, whether that's your mentor, ask them for feedback. Okay. At the end of the day, it's all iterative process, and doing it alone is like, looking like this. You don't see what you don't see. So it's difficult to say how much, really. Hope I'm happy to support. So send me a message afterwards, okay? And I'm happy to discuss this in more detail. Demonstration, yeah, recording will be there. I'm glad it's helpful. Really glad it was helpful. So how tools like SciSpace assist in evaluating quality and impact of research papers during systematic review? So that is a good question. I would imagine when you have filters over there, I kind of manage. You can you have top tier papers, but you can also chat with the paper, right? So with each of the papers, you can, when you open that paper, you can ask what are limitations of this paper. You can then follow it up with, are there any errors in this paper? We can essentially talk to it. I don't know behind the scenes, so I'm just a user, but I would imagine it has a database, or it has, it's been trained on some of the scientific textbooks, methods, and so on. So it should understand what is the standard way of doing things. Is that correct, Deepu?
I have a slightly better way to do this in case somebody wants to see limitations. So what they can do is basically create a database of papers that they think is good enough for their research. I don't know what is the number, but maybe 40, 50 something, and add all of them to their library, all of the papers. And then they can like a specific folder in the library, right? And they can chat with all of those specific PDFs at once with the Copilot in the library itself. So that basically creates a small subset of the data. So it kind of takes in information from all the research papers that you have fed it, and then gives the answers in terms of limitations, etc., according to that. I think that's maybe a better way of doing it, because as with any large language models, there is a possibility that if you ask something that is beyond the scope of the paper itself, there might be hallucinations, right? It will not be as much as, let's say, a chat GPT, because ours is specifically trained on scientific papers. But I would still say that maybe dividing it into a specific subset, a smaller subset, is probably the better way of going about. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Right, so we have a couple of people with right hands. So if I start with Rizwan Ali, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Let's check whether it works. Yeah, should be working. Yes, we should hear you now.
Hi, David. Am I audible?
Hello. Yeah, I can hear you. Do you have any specific question?
Yeah, actually, my question is something different because I've been using this AI for my preparation of my research article, but I want to use the premium version, and I have issue to pay the requisite amount because I do not have currently the international credit card. At the moment, only US dollar like that is acceptable by this AI. So I want to know basically from your end if, because I'm from India, so is there any option for the Indian who can use and pay in the form of Indian rupees.
Okay.
So this is
Can you send me a
my query.
message? Can you send
Yeah.
me a message afterwards so we can take it offline? Because that's something
Yeah,
I cannot answer now. Because I don't know really.
sure, sure, David.
Okay, but
And
send me a
overall,
message.
I must thank you. You have given a very nice presentation.
I'm
Thank you
glad to
very
hear that.
much.
Thank you very much. Hamidullah, can we have your question? Then we'll have Karor, and we're going to wrap up because I've got to run.
Thank you, Mr. David. It was a nice presentation, and
Thank you.
it's first time I see this platform for for asking the questions on chatbot. So I was using ChatGPT and some other AI tools, illicit, but this one works a little better. I feel it's more in synthesized way, and giving the clear answer what we are looking for as a academic questions. So my question was there in the chat, and
Okay.
you read the question and then you forgot it to answer it because you went to the last slides.
I might have
Uh,
the question.
yeah, maybe you can answer that one also, sir. And I have one more question.
Okay.
I chose my topic. That time my area was not studied that much, but in the first slides you mentioned if a topic is studied a lot, it will not help much to study that again and overdo the same thing. So my area is studied so much in last 2 years. More than 700 papers are published, or 600 papers are published in Scopus just in 2 years
That
in
must be
specific
very
my
busy
topic.
area.
Yeah, it's sustainability, green HRM, and all those things. So it's a
Oh, okay.
trending topic.
Right.
Yeah, now I don't have any option to go back because my topic is already accepted and everything is like I
I
came
would,
with a lot of things.
I
So
would
what?
imagine
How can I?
you can still find a new angle or new idea since the area is only 2 years old. I would imagine there is lots of research to be done.
Yeah, yeah. So how can I find a gap in such condition with the help of AI? I'm trying to find gap. Minor gaps are there, but I'm not able to find a major gap for
Right.
the analytical part of my study.
So I always recommend doing a full literature review. I don't know how many literature reviews or review papers have been done in this specific area, but I would start with finding review papers relevant to your research area, and they already identify a couple of research directions over there. What this will give you is an idea of what is currently missing, and also it will give you an idea of what reviews are available. So maybe there is a space for your review as to set yourself out as the expert in this field and present a new way of thinking. And what you can use these tools for is basically review the existing literature and identify what are the misalignments and limitations within the work. Because if this is a new research area growing at a very fast pace, 700 papers in 2 years is really fast, really lots of papers. I would imagine one research groups will say one thing, another research group will say another thing. Who is right? Who is correct? Maybe both are wrong. So looking at this from this kind of critical perspective with the use of AI can definitely pave your way forward. But to answer your question about the difference between literature review for a paper and for a thesis, so
Before going there, let me say the points. Maybe you can help me more with like more clarification. So
yeah,
when I do the search in Scopus and after filtration, I'm getting more than 900 papers, and majority of the papers are in last 2 years, as I
yeah,
explained. And they try to do every angle, and they did what 2 3 moderator mediation and almost similar kind of things. They try to manipulate the variables and
mhm,
find a gap and say like this is a new gap, but
mhm,
still maybe it is possible to do that. And coming with that, like to read all the review paper, it might be very tough for me
mhm,
because how can I select paper, which papers I have to include from this 800 papers? After my keyword, I used almost 6 7 keywords, still I'm getting 800 papers.
right.
So what is your suggestion to reduce the size of the papers that I can come with some paper that I can really cover in my study.
So
And then how can I use which AI tool can help me that I can put all these papers at once and they can give me some suggestions what to do?
So I would recommend either SciSpace, because they should have all of those papers within the database. You can go and have a look at free version. They have access to those databases there. But also you can use, if you already collected all of those papers in the PDF form, you can use, for example, Notebook LM, which is the Google thing, and that would do similar aspects. So the benefit of SciSpace is that you don't have to manually download and upload the papers. So I would personally, I would go with SciSpace on this one. And in terms of narrowing it down, so just to give you an example, I work in a carbon capture area, and last year there was about 500 to 700 papers published in this area. And I still managed to publish a new research, mostly because I'm looking at so carbon capture is a huge field, but within carbon capture, you've got sub areas where you can focus on materials, you can focus on process, you can focus on technology, you can focus on policy, you can focus on economics, you can focus on supply chain, so many different subcategories, right? And within technology, for example, you can focus on solid sorbents, liquid sorbents, membranes, So what I would do is, in the first place, I would build a map of the research area, right? So what are you said it's sustainable HR, is that the case? Or did I get it correctly?
Yeah, it's a sustainability in HR aspect.
Yeah, so I would say HR at the top, sustainability. What are the elements of sustainability in the HR? Okay, is that technology, is that process, operations? And then within operations, what are the methods that people are discussing? Okay, so it's like a breakdown structure. So that helps thinking. I would recommend have a look at Research Rabbit as well, because that's where the visualization of the technology or of the research area can actually help. But happy to take it offline. I'm being mindful of the time, and I know people will be going soon as well, and I have to go as well. So I will respond to your question. Send me an email. You find me on LinkedIn or whenever, or I'll have your email from Luma or something. Send us an email and I'll respond to your questions. We can have a catch-up call later on if that helps, because there's much more to discuss on this. Okay, final question. A couple more minutes. Karur, can you unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello. Thank you for this session. You've talked about something that should be dealt with more in the scientific field. So my question, I already asked the question about the amount of data, and yes, and I would like to add that you've described the state I was in, like I was overwhelmed with the collection of the articles. So now I have a database, but I don't know where is the limit. Should I continue or stop it?
I would stop at this moment and I would go 20 papers at a time, just review them, collect the data, build the data matrix. Like
I have already them in a data matrix. Format.
So have you identified any themes for your analysis? Then I would then look at those columns that I have and think about how would I structure that review? Would I structure it by the methodology? Would I structure it by the material type? How would I do it? Is there any defined theme for you?
It's more about like the findings. It's about reviewing scientific result. I believe in order to limit the amount of data, I've scooped it in a timeline and in a specific continent. I've choose Africa and a timeline 10 years ago. Maybe I should limit it to a 5-year timeline.
You can start with that, and then if there is not enough data, you can start with 3 years really, and then if there is not enough data, expand to 5, and then expand to 10.
Okay, thank you.
Can I
address you a mail or
Yeah,
something.
please do, by all means. I'm more than happy to help.
Yes, I won't take much more of your time, so
No
I'll
worries.
say thank you for your patience and your answers.
I'm happy to be here, that this helps.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, so thank you all for joining. We've overrun for 20 minutes, but that's expected for Q&A session. So hope this was really helpful. Make sure you make use of those codes. I know the SciSpace code, the DH20, it's active for 7 days, so you can have some time to think about it. If you've got follow-up questions about this SciSpace or literature reviews, do send me a message or do send a message to the group, and we are more than happy to support you guys.
Yep. Do check out Professor David's community as well, the one that he's building at Motivated Academic. The link is right there. That community, I feel, is something that I saw from, I'm not a researcher myself, but I see that the kind of questions that you guys are asking, and I think community is something that will be super helpful. It's a global community really, and given Professor Hanak's experience, I think you all would benefit from it. So it's an exclusive community that he's trying to build out, do check that link out that you see on your screen, motivatedacademic.com/career club. Thank you, Professor Hanak,
and thank you for partnering on this, and I'm looking forward to the future collaboration.
Yeah. Awesome.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening or day, wherever you are in the world.
Yeah.
Let's connect on LinkedIn.
Do check out our emails. We are sending the links and a feedback email in your mail. So do check that out, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.